Let's take a look at how do we create higher order functions. So remember, by definition, a higher order function is one which takes another function as a parameter or it returns another function. So let's go ahead and create a function that is going to take another function as parameter. So I'm going to create a function. In this case, I'm using the arrow function syntax. So I'm going to create a function. We'll call it function 1, and this is going to be the body. In this, I'm going to create two parameters. The first one is going to represent another function. We'll call it func. And then the second parameter is simply a message that is we are going to console it. So let's go ahead and console log our message. And after console logging the message, we are going to call the function that is being passed into this function. I'm going to go ahead and format this document. So this function 1 is a higher order function. Why? Because it is taking another function as a parameter. So I'm going to create another function that is going to be passed into this function. Okay, so I'm going to create another function using the arrow function syntax. Let's call it function 2. And this case, I'm just going to pass a single parameter, and this parameter is going to be console log. So we'll just say console log, and then we will just say message from function 2. And then we will add whatever is passed down to this. Okay, this is a simple function. This function 2 is not a higher order function because it doesn't take input another function or does not return a function. But function 1 is the higher order function, and we are going to pass function 2 to function 1. How do we do that? We will simply call this function. So we are going to say function 1. Okay, we're going to pass in two arguments. The first argument is going to be another function, and in this case we will simply pass our function 2 as the first argument, and then over here we will pass a message, and we will say message from function 1. Okay, now let's go ahead and run this. There are a couple of ways you can run this. This is a JavaScript file. You can add your HTML over here and run this in your browser. It is going to run exactly without any changes. For simplicity and easiness, I'm just going to call it using my Node program. So you can run this JavaScript file. In this case, I would not need an HTML file, but this code can be run in your browser without any changes. It does not matter if you run it in your console or in your browser. The important thing over here is to recognize and understand higher order function. So let's go ahead and run this. I will say node and my name of my file name. You will see I have two messages over here. Message from function 1. So this function gets called and it console logs this message. After that, it calls function, and then it is console logging message from function 2. It says undefined because we are not passing anything. Okay, we can go ahead and pass this message, the same one, and then you will see that the same message is translated. The first message is message from function 1, and the second is message from function 2. And since we are passing the same message, we see message from function1. Okay, but without we can ignore the messaging. The important part over here is that I have a function that takes another function as an input. Therefore, this function over here, function1, is a higher order function. Higher order function. So because this qualifies our first point of the definition. The second point of the definition is that if a function returns another function, that is also considered a higher order function. So how does that translate into code? We will simply create another function, and we will call it function3. We'll do the same thing. We can have a single parameter. Okay. At this point, function3 is not a higher order function because it does not take another function as a parameter, nor does it return another function. So let's go ahead and make this a higher order function. In this case, I'm going to return another function from function3. Okay. Now I'm going to use the arrow syntax and anonymous function. I'm going to create an anonymous function using the arrow function syntax. This means I'm simply going to do this. This is going to return another function because this is how you define a function. In this, we can simply console log, and we'll say message from function3. Okay. This will be the indication that when the message prints on our console, this is coming from function3. Okay. Now, how do we call this function? We are going to simply call this function, and it is going to return us another function. So let's go ahead and save that in a variable, and then simply call that function again. So I'm going to create a variable function. I will call it func. I'm going to call function3. This function is going to take a message. So simply I will pass a string, and I will just say message. So function3 comes over here, a message, and then it is going to return another function. So it is going to return another function. At this point, if you run the code, you will see nothing happens. Okay, there's no call, there's no return, there's no message from function3. The reason is function3 is returning another function, and then we need to call the function that has been returned. So in order to complete this, we have to call this function that was returned from function3. Now you will see at the bottom message from function3. Since you call this function again, it is going to call the function that was returned, which is this function over here. Therefore, by definition, function3 is a higher order function as well. Why? Because remember, the second point of a higher order function is that it returns another function. You can also write this function3 in a shorter form. We don't have to create a separate variable and then call that variable as a function. You can do both of these things in a single line. And generally, if you are using a higher order function, you might run into this syntax as well. So if you just wanted to call this in a single line, what you will have to do is you will simply say function3, message, and then we will simply add another set of parentheses. What is this? What does this mean? This means I'm calling this function, function3. This is going to return me another function as by the definition over here. And then the function that is returned I am calling that function again by the use of these parentheses. So I'm going to comment these two lines over here, and then you will see when I run this code, we will still get the same message. So you see message from function 3, and this is being called from this over here. So these two lines can be merged into one if you are looking for a short way to perform the same operation. You can do this in this fashion over here.